So, prior to 2020, many of us probably worked from home as an exclusive benefit, maybe once a month or once a week or something, but it felt like a very coveted thing to do. Oh, I'm working from home today. And everybody was very excited and looking forward to having those sessions then. And of course, February/March 2020 came, and it essentially became, the default way of work for many of us that could do it. And 2 years after, the teething period is over, the initial excitement and novelty of it has passed and has basically become our life. And as many organizations have now also adopted either a remote first culture or a hybrid culture, we are seeing that more and more of the way we used to view remote work is also evolving as it has come here to stay. And we also know from research that many people, really value working from home, right? And we also find that number even much higher amongst people with families. And so today with our panelists, we're going to discuss the journey so far from basically trying to see from two perspectives. So I'll introduce Luca, who is a wonderful engineer here at Solarisbank, to explain to us the view from the team view. And we also have Marissa from TaxFix, the engineering manager there, who will talk to us about her experience from a managerial view. And she's also been onboarded into the remote culture for the first time in the last 2 years, while Luca has had a bit more experience with that. So without further ado, I will now call Marissa to introduce herself, and then Luca can do the same, and then we can open the floor for the discussions today. Marissa, over to you.
Great. Yeah, thanks you so much, Valentina. It's great to be here today, and thanks for the intro. As you mentioned, yes, so I'm Marissa. I'm an engineering manager at TaxFix, and as you said before COVID hit, I had never really been a remote manager. I'd never really worked remotely. I came to TaxFix in February of 2020, and I had kind of picked that company because I had been looking to improve myself as a manager, and I saw like an opportunity for myself there, and I started, and then 1 month later we're all working from home, and it was a completely new challenge that I wasn't expecting in my management career, that I wasn't entirely prepared to handle, and I've kind of just been figuring it out as I've gone along, with a lot of help from others and a lot of other input, and so yeah, I've been trying. My whole motivation as a manager was essentially to try to make the best environment for my team, and that's something that in the remote setting has been from a completely different perspective, from a completely different set of challenges. So that's one of the reasons that I'm so interested in this topic and was excited to contribute here today. Yeah, before I had been working at TaxFix, I had been working in a management role for a couple of years before that, but the remote work was completely new to me. And before that, I had been working as a software engineer, similar to what you had said, with like remote work was like a thing you do sometimes as like a treat. That was what remote work was to me before I started and before COVID happened. So yeah, that's a little bit about me, a little bit about my past. So Luca, would you like to introduce yourself now as well?
Yeah, well, thank you. So my name is Lucas. I've been working as a software engineer for Solarisbank for a little bit over 2 years now. And before that, I worked for, I think, 9 years remote, not always from home. Actually, we had an office, my company had an office in Berlin, but my team was somewhere else in Germany. And yeah, after so many years working away from my team, I was kind of sick of it, and I wanted to sit next to my teammates in an office. So I quit and I joined Solarisbank, and I worked in the office for a month and a half. And then COVID happened, and I had to work from home. So yeah, my plans didn't work as expected at all. And the thing is, like before, when I was working away from my team, it was the idea of being away was like mostly unthought. I didn't really try to think about it and how I could make it work for me actually for a very long time, almost up until the end when I realized that this was not a setup that was working for me. And now that we had to have, I've been putting a lot of thought about how to organize work in this setting. So yeah, I'm pretty excited to participate. I was really happy to read about it. There is actually a lot of research about this topic that it comes from way before COVID, and it's really interesting to see what's been found out about how to organize work in this kind of setting.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. Welcome, Marissa. Welcome, Luca. We're looking forward to getting into the conversations with you today. Before we start, Mara, you had your hand up. Was that a mistake or you had a question? You are muted. Still muted, Mara.
Oh, sorry. I think it's very interesting, this meeting today, exactly because of this point. In our company, where we were also think before COVID begins, we start with home office, and it's really a journey with excitement and new regulations that you need to have. And sometimes it was very a different art to communicate with the people. And that's the reason that I'm here today, to see how other departments, other companies are doing with this, to keep in touch with the people, to communicate and not lose this feeling that we are working in a company.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool.
And I'm living in Berlin as well, so far away from my company. There is in Cologne. And then it's of course something different.
Yes, I can imagine.
So I was running.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Mara. So we are glad that everybody is here and engaged and very interested in the topic. So on to the first question. And I think I'll ask Marissa actually. In your opinion, please describe the impact of remote work on culture. So again, culture is one of the pillars that would actually, make or mar any organization. And so from your experience so far, how would you describe the impact of remote work on the company culture?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, as far as like how we approach our work with each other and how we like the values that we have in our work, I feel like that hasn't changed terribly much, but I do feel like the connection and the social aspect is something that has changed. And it's not so much that the desire for how it should be has changed, but that the way that we can implement it has changed. So for example, like how do we have team activities? How do people kind of get to know each other? Sometimes you show up to a couple meetings, like maybe you have stand up every day, and then otherwise you don't really see your team. You don't know what they're doing or what they're working on, or that you may not have those interactions with them. So some of that like social connection might be missing, even if the same like motives and same interests are still there. Yeah,
cool. Thank you. So same question to you, Luca. How would you describe the impact of remote work on company culture?
I think what Marissa said was right. Is that it has made things very different. And I had the feeling that still we were trying to do the same as we were doing in the office setting, trying to replicate everything, and even the stuff that we realized that was lost, everything that was spontaneous, basically, right? Everything that wasn't prepared before, everything that was spontaneous kind of got lost, and we tried to replicate that kind of in the beginning, I would say, exactly like it was in the office, trying to maybe like formalize what wasn't informal before. But I'd say that bit by bit and slowly this has a bit changed. We've noticed that some stuff don't work at all, and that maybe we can also use this new setting to try to do something else, something completely different. And I would say this is the relationship between people is maybe what has suffered, is maybe a big word, but maybe actually that would be it, as suffered the most. And it is very central in the way we have to rethink how we approach team binding or communication inside of the team. This is pretty central, I think.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Marissa and Luca, for shedding light on that. And I think just to touch on, or maybe to continue from what Mara was saying, but we also wanted to pick that up as well, was in terms of communication, right? So your colleague is no longer beside you or behind you or down the hall that you can go you can go to meet. So how has remote work impacted communication in that sense as well? And we would also link communication to productivity, right? Because they go hand in hand most times. So let's talk about it in relation to that. The impact of remote work on communication, its impact on productivity.
I can make a comment here maybe about how I think where I've seen the biggest impact, at least in my teams, has also been with like maybe more junior and mid-level engineers, where you can't necessarily roll your chair over to somebody and say, hey, can you help me with this question really quick? Especially if you have to get past that barrier of like asking the question in the first place. Are you going to ask it in the team channel with everybody there? Are you going to ask like somebody who might not have time? And it kind of, I think, puts a lot of pressure on people to seek out the answers on their own that maybe wasn't there before, where you could look over and say, oh, yeah, that person's free. I'm just going to pop over and ask them this question. I think like one thing that we've done, at least in this case, is also put kind of buddying up people to some extent. So a new joiner, we pair them with the last new joiner from the team because they know they've had the same experience. They've gone through this recently. They're still learning the answers themselves, so they can kind of help each other out. And so that's like one thing that we've done to support them. But yeah, I think that's probably where I've seen the biggest impact.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Marissa. And I think what you talked about, especially for the junior mid-level, I think is so important. Coming into a new organization where you only see Zoom faces, but you need to still build these relationships anyway. And of course, you don't want to be the person that is constantly asking questions, even though you should, right? They're your teammates, you should. But of course, because you are new, you want to make a good impression, and it's a bit tricky for you to do that. And so I really like the idea around buddying up with the past new joiners, just to make sure that, again, they've navigated it in this current context. And so they know what it is, rather than speaking to somebody that was onboarded when we were physical and doesn't really fully understand the nuances. Thanks a lot, Marissa. So Luca, over to you.
Yeah, once again, I'll concur with Marissa. I actually wrote in my notes that under communication that this is the biggest impact. I think this is what has changed the most. I think one of the reasons is that communications is quite often extremely spontaneous. Even people who overthink everything they say and everything they write. I think we don't realize how much our communications is influenced by our context, is influenced by our culture. And it makes it maybe a bit more difficult to reflect upon. Maybe that's something that we tend to forget, that this is also something that we can control and influence. Well, while thinking about it, I had actually a little theory. Everybody can think for themselves if it's true or not, but I had the impression that low context culture actually had less problem to deal with that than high context culture. I have only anecdotal evidence, but I think that in cultures where the common shared context is very important and got lost due to the physical distance between people. This was more difficult for people in this context to adapt. So what I've tried to do, and what I would invite people to do, is kind of deconstruct and reflect on the way that they communicate with other people. Also consider that everything is communication. So like it is what you say, but it is also how you say it. It is what you don't say, what you forget to say. So I think that being very explicit about what we think, being very explicit about what we expect, and making as little assumptions as possible about what other people think is quite important. And this is something I would invite people to reflect upon.
I see, and I like the aspect of, again, D&I, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion coming into this context as well, considering the fact that we have, of course, definitely in Berlin, this is actually very prevalent, right? We have a melting pot of cultures across, right? So it adds another level of, complexity and, of course, opportunities to learn as well. So I really like your invitation over there for people to be reflective and, try to make things less complicated for others by being very explicit about what they need, when, how, and not making assumptions. So that's so true. So Luca, you had mentioned something in the intro about us doing the same things we used to do when we were in the office and trying to replicate that, in the remote setting. So that actually leads to my other questions regarding processes. So how has remote work impacted, our processes as they used to be in this new context?
I think a big one, and I'm sure it's not only at Solarisbank, but it is the increasing amount of meetings. It feels like we need to synchronize more, meet more, talk more. And my feeling was this is a replacement for the coffee machine talk, probably, or the spontaneous meeting of like 3 people standing up, discussing in one corner of the office and other people joining. And because of this loss, we had to make for it, and then we created more meetings. I think this is still changing because I've heard a lot of people complaining about it. So there are ideas of how to handle that. Maybe make meetings less mandatory, have mandatory agendas for meeting. I think this one is quite important. Taking more notes also to allow people to join only if they can, but then being able to know what is going on. So I think the increase of meeting is maybe the biggest one in my opinion, but I see that we're already making progress in understanding how to reduce the amount of meeting and then increase the productivity per meeting, if I can call it like that.
Exactly. Thank you. So Marissa, what is your take on how our processes have evolved or not evolved in the remote working context?
Yeah, I was nodding furiously to the meetings part because that's something that I have absolutely felt. I know, especially in the beginning, like there was so much trial and error to kind of try to figure out what was going to work. Like one of the things that we tried was having silent meetings where essentially there would be a document that we would create together and everybody would take some time to like write their update or add whatever content they felt they like. Maybe comment on a document if somebody already wrote up the agenda in advance, like adding some comments. So we kind of used that time that everybody had a moment to get their voice in. Everybody had a moment to share their thoughts, and then we could use the rest of the time for open discussion on any of the points that were still in contention, I guess, at the end of that. So that's one thing that we tried that we enjoyed. I think in general, yeah, we tried to.
Do you still have those silent meetings?
We do, yeah. And on some cases, we don't maybe do it maybe a little bit less often than we used to. But for example, like if we have any update meetings with a large group of people, that's something that we do. So it's not just like one person gets their idea out there and then that's the only thing we talk about for the rest of the meeting. We kind of have a chance to share everything and make sure that everybody's synced up. So there's not like a need for a follow-up all the time. So that is something that we still do. We also have implemented like a no meeting day as well, which has had varying success, I would say. Yeah, it's sometimes it can be, I think it needs some active participation to say, no, I'm not going to take a meeting this day, because it becomes sometimes the day of like, oh, spontaneous meeting day instead of no meeting day. So that's something we're still kind of improving on.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe I'll hear Lucas take on this, because we do have a
focus there, right? And we actually extended it. I know that in my team we're trying to have another one, and just have every meetings basically Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Very meeting heavy, obviously, especially for people who have a lot of cross-functional responsibilities. It is packed, but yeah, having 2 days where you can advance, and when you can bring everything you're working on forward is luxurious, and I enjoy it very much. I miss the days where I know I had like 1 day to tackle a problem, and I'm very happy to have found that back actually. But you, like you said, right? You have to be consistent. You have to have everybody on board, and people need to accept that not this day, right? Like if I'm losing 1 hour, I'm going to lose my focus, and this is going to make maybe my productivity suffer. So yeah, I've been enjoying that very much.
Awesome. And have your stakeholders been enjoying that as well? Because
I would say so. Yeah, I would say so. I'm less available, but I'm more productive. So this is a balance we have to achieve. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so let me go back to another point that Marissa actually mentioned in the beginning, and we already started talking about some solutions, but let's take it back a little bit and maybe look at it, as a whole. So onboarding new joiners, within a remote first culture, we talked about it a little bit, but let's talk a bit more about some of the challenges that we see with that now. And so, of course, I'll hear from Marissa first, and I'll hear from Luca, and then we can now maybe navigate on to what do we need to do differently in order to make this remote culture work for our new joiners. Thanks. So Marissa?
Yeah, so I mentioned the pairing the new joiner with the last new joiner. A few other things that we've tried at least have been like creating a landing page for people joining the team that has a lot of the information that they might need. At least, we're using Notion for our documentation, and everything is documented in Notion, but it's almost impossible to find it sometimes. Especially if you're new, you might not know where to look for something or what you're even looking for. And so this landing page kind of has the tips and information that's really necessary to get started. And we ask people when they've joined if there's essentially anything missing, and ask them, one of the goals that we have in the document is to add your own addition or add your own note or make an edit on something that you felt was missing. So we it's something that's kind of a living document that if we feel like that there was important information that might be lacking, or something that has changed since the last time it was used, then that still kind of gets updated over time, and it also makes a contribution for the new joiner early on as well. I think we also try to set up some very clear expectations around what we're expecting from somebody in the beginning, when we're going to have check-ins, how we're going to have check-ins, and also trying to get them kind of involved with what's going on in the team very early on. We usually, in general, we've kind of to some extent had virtual hangouts sometimes in the team. So that's something that usually in the beginning, I started actually doing it on a very regular cadence, once a month or once a week, we have a coffee chat, and once a month we have a team activity together. And it kind of felt sometimes it felt a little bit more like mandatory fun than it felt like actual team bonding time. And so now we're planning things a little bit more spontaneously. Sometimes we say after the end of our stand-up, once we're done giving our updates, we do our 15-minute updates, and then we have 15 minutes essentially still blocked out in our calendar usually for these meetings. So anybody who wants to stay and hang out and have a chat in the call, that's something that we still kind of do. Anybody who has the time can still kind of sit around and talk to the team a little bit more. So we've kind of switched from more planned fun to more spontaneous fun, with a couple maybe team activities and things that are planned around maybe certain activities, events, like celebrations, more so than it's every month on the dot.
Awesome. So at least from getting them running up and running quickly, you have the body system, you have the documentation, you also have then the social interactions within the team, and of course you have been modifying it as it went along. But I also have a question regarding how they will build their networks outside their regular stakeholders. So, did you see that that's maybe a challenge? And have you already thought about some ways to get that to cross that hurdle, for example? Because, again, visibility is very important even outside your immediate stakeholders, for example. So is this something you consider to be a challenge? And if it is, what are some of the things that, are being done today to tackle that?
Yeah, actually, I think this is even something that I have a challenge with, because in the time that I've been at TaxFix in the last 2 years, the company grew from 100 people to 450 people, and we've pretty much been remote during that time. So there are people who I have no idea who they are or what they're doing at the company sometimes, and I sometimes am missing that connection with people who are outside the group that I'm directly working with. Yeah. So some of the things that at least we have are more general, larger company events and things. We've kind of been doing an annual Zoom talent show. And we have some other things as well. We've usually we have end of quarter events and such where we really connect with people. We had people sign up for crafting workshops or something, or some sort of activity together. And so it was people who had this kind of shared or mutual interest to want to learn a particular skill would come together, and we'd send them maybe supplies to their house or something so that they could do that together. So I think we also have a company-wide hackathon where people can suggest ideas that they want to work on, and they make teams with people across the company, across the organization, and it gives you an opportunity to work with and interact with people that might not be part of your daily day-to-day.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you very much. Let me just read. I see some comments in here. Let me just check and read them out. Okay. 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 Okay, so Felipe says that we have breakfast day, it's optional. Okay, same idea. Okay, awesome. Yes, so thank you very much for sharing. So Luca, so back to the original question about new joiners and how, what is the uniqueness that this remote work called remote working system has brought to their own onboarding experience, and what are some of the things that we see that we are doing differently to help them navigate this phase?
Related to what Mara wrote in the chat, I felt like something that is missing is what's happening at the office when you're physically present and you see people interacting with each other. And that's also a way to learn about people, is just see them interact with each other during meetings, but also outside of meetings. And I remember the first month when I was going to the office, we would also have lunch every day, and I would always come with because I like a good lunch break. And it was very easy to learn about each other and to learn how to communicate with other people, because they have different personalities, and obviously you interact with them differently. And this is, I'd say this is mostly lost, and this is where maybe a stronger bond with new joiners is really important. And yeah, at the moment I'm mentoring a junior, and so she's newer than me in the company, and I try to take time, so not only for us to talk about a professional future and how she can improve here and there, etc., but also to just chat and hear about her feelings and hear about how she experienced certain discussions, how she experienced certain meetings and stuff like that. And I think this was quite beneficial for her to hear that, and to be able also to open her heart, is maybe a strong word, but like to be genuine, let's say, to be genuine, right? Mask off and be honest about what she feels. And I think that this connection was really important to allow her to really be herself and talk about other people. I think this was very beneficial. Other than that, we've been doing the same. So this spontaneous, we had this, we called that, I think it's a bad name, but we called it the COVID gathering, where we would meet every week for an hour. And after sometimes people were less interested and didn't show up. And it also kind of felt like another mandatory meeting. Yeah. And I think Marissa touched upon it. It felt like, oh shit, like, oh, I had 4 hours this afternoon. I had 4 hours and I could focus, and then I have to spend 1 hour chatting with my colleagues, even though I really like them, right? But sometimes I just didn't feel like. But and on the other hand, so now we've reduced it to biweekly. But on the other hand, sometimes we were just so happy and we stayed for like 3 or 4 hours instead of just one. And this doesn't happen on command, and I think Marissa said it as well, right? This is something that's spontaneous. You can't really program it. And yeah, other than that, we sometimes, so this gathering was becoming a bit boring sometimes. So actually this junior started to organize games, and that was also quite fun. It was another way to try to get to know each other. Well, I mean, it's team building 101. But it was also nice. And other than that, we try to meet. Sometimes we don't really have a jour fix, but we have some people coming at the office, some other not, because they're not in Berlin at all. But we also try to have that connection when possible on certain conditions.
But just, sorry, Marissa.
Oh, I just wanted to add that, what you mentioned with like the mandatory fun and such, like, that one thing at least that worked really well with my team, and that also kind of helped us get to know each other a bit better, was that we had once a month, one person from the team would prepare a quiz about where they're, like, their hometown, their country, where they're from, and essentially everybody else on the team would have to kind of guess and figure out, like, I'm from the US, and I shared like a map of the country and had people guess where certain cities were and such. And so it kind of was a really fun activity for us to get to know a little bit about each other, but then also to kind of come together. And that was something where it was fairly consistent that people from the team showed up and seemed to enjoy it.
Yeah, and I think, in the end, that's like you're killing two birds with one stone, because then on the one hand, you are getting people to understand your cultural context and where you're coming from, and you're also educating them as well, and also creating a fun bonding experience. So that's also very nice. Thank you so much for contributing. And so I think I would pivot the conversation a little bit into some of the obvious, challenges that have come to fore, with the remote culture, which will be things like burnout, for example, and also the other associated mental health or psychological challenges that have come also with the remote work. And I would like Luca to speak to us first on his perspective on the impact of remote work on psychological safety. What do we need to do differently, seeing that this is the norm, right? So what do we need to do differently in order to make sure that we don't lose our people along the way? Because obviously the impact is widely felt, and we have many colleagues that just quit their jobs just to go and rest, and that's it shouldn't be that way, right? So I would like to hear more from Luca on that.
Yeah, I think one thing I should start with is also acknowledging that it's been easier for me than for other people, right? I have a fairly large apartment. I have a room where I can be quiet, and I've seen people working from their kitchen, on the kitchen chair, which is quite uncomfortable. I think the company was nice enough to give us chairs. I jumped on it, and I brought my chair in the U-Bahn along the U5 with my second screen, because I can't. Second screen is quite important. But it is easier for some people than for others. So my wife, who's here, has a lot of colleagues in Paris where rents are extremely high, and she has colleagues who they are like two people working in 45 square meter studio with two kids, and this is. So yeah, I just wanted to state that one must realize that there are people work in different conditions in this remote environment, and it has been very difficult for some people, and I can say that for me it's been actually relatively fine. I think one of the obvious challenges at the beginning, I had the feeling that it has improved, was the blurriness between work and normal life. It was hard to do Feierabend, right? To say stop. That's the end of the day. You could write one more messages and just leave your laptop open for another 10 minutes. So as a software developer, it is like for your test to finish. Or something like this, and this blurriness is actually quite detrimental. I think trying to have a correct, let's call that hygiene or rhythm helps a lot when it comes to that, to be able to switch off completely. So because you're home and your bedroom is your office, which is my case. Your bedroom is in your office. That's when the day is done, it's done. I think we can be quite frank when it comes to that. I had another point, but I forgot about it. So I let Marissa answer that question. Maybe I'll remember that.
Okay, thanks, Marissa.
Yeah, at least there's a couple things that come to mind for me. The first, at least I use my one-on-ones as a touch point with people on my team to kind of get an idea of how things are going. Like one of the things that I read was asking people about their happy index. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you? And in the first few one-on-one meetings where I was asking this, I also felt a little bit silly feeling like, oh, on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you? But it's something that like I take note of, and I can kind of see from week to week if there's a trend in a direction or another, and then we can talk about that point as well. I also ask people about their workload. I ask if it's low, like that maybe they don't even know what their next task is going to be. They're not sure like what's coming up. Moderate, where it's like something it's fairly balanced. They have a good like workload coming up, but it's not too much. High is something that might not be maintainable in the long run, but it is maintainable for now. And then fire is when you kind of hit that point of it's not maintainable anymore. And so I think if you start to see people saying hi consistently, like that's as a manager, a point to say, this is something that I need to take action on. I think as a manager myself, the things that have helped me in particular have been I'm very much a morning person, and I find that for me 6 a.m. would be like sleeping in. That would be like a late morning, and I find that I'm most productive and most like active earlier in the day. And so I've started. I spoke with my manager about it as an option, and I have started putting a blocker in my calendar in the afternoon, so that I can start my day a little bit earlier, but then also end it earlier. And essentially, at a certain time of day, I pretty much do not take any more meetings unless it's something that is incredibly important where I really like see the value of having it after that time. I also have been blocking longer slots in my calendar for lunch. Like I might even put like an hour and a half or 2 hours in my calendar for lunch, because I assume maybe sometimes people will schedule meetings over it, but I'll then always have at least some time for lunch, because hopefully if I have this much of a blocker and people are being like, when they're picking, they won't hopefully take the whole slot. So that kind of like keeps that time out for me. And then I have that like set end time at the end of the day. And those are all things that have at least helped me kind of make the like meeting schedule a bit more manageable.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks a lot for all the tips you're sharing. And we have Mara asking for a possible list of all the ideas that are being shared here. So of course we have the recording, and I imagine that we can also maybe share some notes. Bradley is saying, I just miss all the reasons to move around, both in the office and with business travel. So much more when we went to the office. Really think it takes having a desk job to the extreme from stagnation and health perspective. My only complaint or challenge with work remotely, and that's true, right? So again, we're quite sedentary, but I think to the points that some of the hints you gave us now is talking about putting blockers in your calendar for actually, if not even only lunch, but even just to take a break and just walk around or do your exercise. I think it was yesterday, I was having a call with a colleague and I saw that she was on a walking pad. So she was getting her steps in while taking the call, right? So again, I like the fact that 2 years in, many of us have taken our lives back again, because I think at the beginning we were just really scrambling and trying to make sense of it all and keep it moving. But now we're saying, okay, now this is what it is. This is what I need to do in order to make my life, structured again and make sure that my work isn't driving me, but I'm now back in charge. So thank you so much, Luca and Marissa, for your contributions. One last question before we open it up for Q&A. Another drawback which we are seeing regarding remote work is the impact on women in the workplace, for example. So we see that more women are probably dropping out, or they're taking reduced hours, or we of course, the researchers are already predicting that this would already impact their promotion visibility, for example. So what do we say in terms of how do we see that impacting our women in the workplace, and what can we do differently in order to make sure that that is no longer a blocker for our women? Because the responsibilities are what they are, but from your experience, what do you think would be ideal for us to pay attention to?
I can maybe add a couple things here, at least, which first of all, I also recently read an article that was saying that Slack and more communications over Slack have actually had like a benefit to women, because there's less feedback about their tone or how they communicate or how they speak that's coming up because of more written communication and an increase of written communication. As far as hours and like time and that commitment to like life outside of work as well, I know this has actually given us a chance to kind of be a bit more flexible with how we can support some of the women on our team. For example, like I have somebody who has to pick their kid up from school every day at 3 p.m. and they have the flexibility to do that. They can put a blocker in their calendar and be involved in meetings and stuff, and then potentially work at times that are best for them, because they don't have to commute to the office and be there from like 9 to 5 or something, that they can be a bit more flexible with their hours.
Awesome. So flexibility is the name of the game, basically, and of course, understanding.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you, Luca.
Yeah, so I was thinking the same about flexibility. I think this is quite important. I think if we're not allowing for flexible hours, then we're not making the most of remote work. And flexibility is especially important for marginalized groups and for caretakers. And in that regard, I think we should consider that a lot. And something I'm trying to fight for is learn to be more asynchronous in our communication. I think this is quite important, and this is probably, in my opinion, the next step is like once we've settled down and feel comfortable with working remotely, we need to learn to be a bit more asynchronous to allow people, so caretakers, but also like Marissa said, right? People would prefer to work in the morning, in the afternoon. People who would like to satisfy Brad, who want to go to the gym in the afternoon. It's better. Going to the groceries also during the day is easier, and if we can have the luxury to be able to do that, or to allow people to do that, I think it's quite beneficial also. And maybe we've read the same article, but there was an article in the New York Times 5 days ago actually, that's about remote work. It was called, I think, the 2-year 5 million person experience. And what I find interesting in that article is that there were different people from marginalized group who said that they benefited from remote work because they didn't have to participate in the office culture, which was quite often very normalized, kind of a boy group kind of vibe, and they say they didn't fit and they didn't feel they belong, and sometimes they missed promotions because they were told that they didn't really fit into the group, and the people didn't like how they expressed themselves, and actually, thanks to remote work, they got that promotion because they were judged solely based on their work and not on their, let's say, on their aura. And so I think that if handled correctly, and if we pay attention to people who maybe are left forgotten because of that setting, it can actually benefit, I think, marginalized groups. I would say so, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Marissa and Luca, for your awesome ideas and contributions. I think to wrap this up, we see that remote work is, in fact, a blessing. So while it has created new opportunities that could be viewed as challenges, but actually there are new opportunities to do work differently, to incorporate people differently, to produce our work in a different way than we even imagined was possible. And it's basically creating new frontiers for brilliant ideas to continue to enhance the employee experience, at our different companies. So thank you so much, everyone. We have 8 minutes left. Now we're going to open up the floor for any questions or additional contributions. And thank you so much to our panelists. So do we have any questions or contributions?
I have a question.
Yes, go for it.
So Lucas, you were saying that the next step is being more async, right? And there are a lot of people that they feel afraid to lose that human touch, right? That personal thing. I am for async. I am all async, and I can really like separate this. Okay, I'm working, I'm doing async, I'm doing a meeting, and I am chit chatting, right? But there are people that don't. What's your take on that?
Yeah, this is a very good point, because I've been thinking about. I think that it impacted the remote setting is impacting more people who are extroverts than introverts. Although I don't think this is a clear dichotomy, or this is black and white. And I actually don't have an answer for that, because I've been reading what GitLab is doing, right? Like GitLab is totally async. They have people in the same team across many time zones, and they have a lot of documentation about their processes. Everything is open. Everything is readable, and I've been thinking about exactly that, right? I think what helps is that being async doesn't mean that there is no human contact at all. I don't think this is about that exactly, although it is nearing it. I think this is about what they insist on is self-serving information. It is more about the circulation of information. What I find interesting there is that they also said that you have to unlearn almost as much as you have to learn. And still, I feel like it doesn't replace some of the interactions. What I would say, what I've noticed is that what is important is just making the cost of getting information lower, or getting the cost of providing information lower. And that's it, right? But sometimes you do have to pay. Sometimes you want to have a chit chat about your about how you're feeling, and I think this is enough of a justification to set up a little meeting with someone about to talk about your feelings, to talk about how you're feeling in the team at the moment. I like to talk with my EM, so I like to talk about that with Manny. But sometimes it's important to do it with other people. I still think you're right, and that for some people something is getting lost there, and that we're probably not getting back at all. This is true. So maybe it has made stuff a bit easier for introverts, a bit harder for extroverts. Marissa, do you have an idea about it?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is a large part of my responsibility as a manager to the team, is to kind of understand what everybody is looking for and what they need from their team and what support they want to have, and to try to make sure that that is available and there for people. I know one of the popular topics for us right now is, how do we want to work coming up in the future? Do we want to come to the office more often or something like that? And I sent out a survey to my team. I essentially asked them what they wanted to be doing, and I asked them, what do they miss from the office? And if they were at the office, what would they miss from their home? To see what sort of answers that I would get. And I mean, largely it came down to the social connection. And so I've been trying to focus on that more as far as how we're going to be moving going forward. So even if we maybe don't have like a set time that we come to the office, maybe we try to have a lunch together every now and then, or something where it's an event where people can come together if they would like to, and to kind of make those sort of touch points for people, that even if we're not like sitting together at a desk, that we know who each other are, that we have fun together, that we interact with each other. Yeah, I think that's kind of like what I see as a large part of my role as a manager in a remote team.
Awesome. And I think, thank you so much, Marissa and Luca. So in the end, it's not a one size fits all. It's up to, to us as well as our leads as well, to make sure that we are paying attention and customizing the experience that works for us in the most efficient way, because obviously having too many meetings as well is not helpful, and neither is having none as well. So getting that balancing is awesome. Okay, we have 2 more minutes. Any other question or contribution to this awesome talk today? So Daniel says, how do you deal with cameras in calls? Do all team members use their cameras in calls? Is there an obligation? Have you noticed any advantages or disadvantages with or without cameras? Thank you, Daniel.
Ooh, yeah, I mean, in general, I do think at TaxFix, at least, we do a lot of meetings where, like, especially in smaller or team meetings, we do often have our cameras on. In larger meetings, we probably have our cameras off. I know like camera fatigue is a real thing. And if I'm sitting in a meeting all day, having to essentially be on, like I'm always looking directly at the camera. I'm always, interacting and trying to give indication that I'm listening, and having to do that for most of the day can be super exhausting. So I think it certainly has its advantages to have a camera on. I think it does kind of foster a bit more of like, yes, that's a real person that I'm talking to. I can, and for me as well, I'm hearing impaired, so it really helps me to see people's mouths, to be able to, they're looking right at me, I can understand better what they're saying. But it also, there are times where it's too much, and I think it's okay to say it's all right to have your camera off if you're not feeling it, if you need to have a break, and particularly in like larger meetings, I don't think it should be an obligation.
Thank you so much. Luca, last words from you on the camera and calls? Yeah,
I think we do the same. I think it's going to be a standard pretty much, is that it's more lively. It doesn't give you the feeling that you're talking to a brick wall when people have their camera on, but I wouldn't make it mandatory. Maybe it's not your day, maybe your connection's not great. There are a lot of stuff that would explain that it's not working. But I think in general, it's definitely better to have it. It's a bit more humane. But yeah, there's something that in the same way that you can't have everybody talking at the same time in a Zoom call, which you can have in a meeting room. they have ways in which we interact that we probably have to reassess. But I remember that I didn't like at all when I had like phone calls with a lot of clients, and we were like 7 on the phones back then. It was horrific, especially when it was in German. It was really difficult. So yeah, I was probably a little bit better with camera.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you all so very much for staying with us on this journey. We know that it's been an awesome session for you. This session is recorded and it will be available for you to rewind and refresh and check all the amazing points that we have for you. So in summary, we see that the future looks bright. Yeah, it means in the future is a reflective future. It's a future where we are innovating. It's a future where we care about each other, and it's also a future where we also take responsibility for the quality of our lives while at work. So thank you all very much for your time today, and we wish you an amazing evening. Thank you all. Bye. Thank you.